Hey, what's going on? Dr. Medic here. For those who may not know how this video works, I usually take one of my hour-plus long videos and split it into segments based on class, for those who may have been turned away due to the daunting runtime of the original video. This time, it's from my TF2 Biggest Weapon Glow-Up's first unlocked video, which was 1 hour, 51 minutes, and 55 seconds. To make it interesting, since I didn't go over stock weapons, I will go over stock weapons that have changed for that class in each video, and they'll be placed at the end, so even if you've seen the original video, there will be something new for you. Because the original video is a ranking, I have slightly re-edited some parts, and now will work on a +5, -5 system, with 0 being neutral, +5 being a major transformation in a positive way, and -5 being a big transformation in the opposite negative way. Since we finished the segment on Scout, that means Soldier is next. Hoorah. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that a lot of you are going to be surprised about this next entry because it technically had no real changes. It functions nearly identically to how it did back in the day when it was added to the game initially. However, because of a technicality, a pretty big one at that, it would honestly be considered a sizable glowdown, at minimum compared to some other weapons on this list. I'm talking about the best melee weapon in the game, the direct hit.
This is my world. You are not welcome in my world.
The direct hit was added in the war update back on December 17, 2009, and it is a rocket launcher replacement that is very, very front-loaded. 25% more damage, which means you can do up to 140 damage at point blank, 80% faster projectile speed, and the ability to mini-crit enemies that are blast jumping or are knocked into the air via your rocket. This all comes at the downside of a 70% explosion radius penalty, which, as the name implies, heavily favors hitting an enemy directly rather than crowds. It's about the same size as a teleporter for reference. There has only been one minor stat change, yet this change is the reason why it deserves the spot it has. This right here. Back in 2009, it didn't say mini crits targets launched into the air via explosives, grappling hooks, or rocket packs. I'm pretty sure grappling hooks doesn't even work anymore, I don't know. Instead, it said mini crits against airborne targets. This may seem like a nothing burger, but if you played TF2 prior to 2015 and remember the reserve shooter before then, or you use the current atomizer post 2017 frequently, you know. You see, the atomizer, to my knowledge, is the only weapon that still has the airborne stat as part of its stat line. Airborne simply implies not touching the ground with your own 2 feet. Do you see the problem? I'm sure a lot of you picked it up right away. The reserve shooter from 2015 was often regarded as one of the cheesiest weapons because it would mini-crit airborne targets, which include those who were falling and jumping. And this was the original way the direct hit worked. To be fair, the reserve shooter was a tad cheesier than the direct hit in this regard because it was hit scan, but nonetheless, the direct hit did mini-crit jumping enemies. 162 damage for jumping. And it's a pretty fast projectile, so it's not impossible to hit. There may be a bit of contention with this one, but with how busted it could be, it's just insane how this passed through. Because you could just be one-tapped as someone with a medic health or below for jumping and falling, I think even the edge cases give this thing a major bump up. Don't get me wrong, the direct hit is still solid today, but because of the cheese potential, it gets a bunch of extra credit. This one isn't very clear for a multitude of reasons, and it's kind of hard for me to quantify because I wasn't even playing TF2 at the time the original version existed. I wouldn't play for another about 2 years, and that was on Xbox. So I could be easily overestimating or underestimating the effectiveness of this weapon. So I put it quite close to neutral, but I think it's slightly better overall now than it was on release. If we got any veterans in the chat, let me know if I'm right or if I'm wrong. Once again, I could be off base with this one. It's the buff banner.
Sound off like you've got a horn.
The buff banner is the only soldier banner without a passive upside, with the battalion's backup and contra having a 20 health bonus and +1 to 4 per tick health regen thing respectively. Despite this, the buff banner is a solid defensive but more so offensive banner to run, especially with the weapon it was intended to be paired with being the direct hit. Dealing 600 damage will allow you to blow this horn, which gives you and anyone in a 450 hammer unit radius mini-crits for a full 10 seconds. You can also hold the banner. If you start the animation, but you just hold down mouse 1, you can hold it until you're ready to go. Very simple and sweet item, but Now we must discuss the original version of the buff banner, which had two differences compared to modern day. First, it used to last 14 seconds rather than 10. That's right, you got an extra 4 seconds of mini crits that you could use and give to your teammates. However, while this sounds nice, 14 seconds, it also required 1,000 damage to fill rather than just 600. So it took significantly longer to fill, but you had an additional 4 seconds of mini crits. This one certainly depends on how good or bad you are as a player. Though in my opinion, it already takes a decent amount of time to fill up the 600 damage requirement. 1,000 is kind of crazy unless you're playing like a wuss or you're just popping off. The extra 4 seconds is nice, but I would rather have these slightly shorter durations more often, as I feel like those 4 extra seconds are going to get wasted more often than not, and you'll just not have it nearly as often. Maybe I'm wrong, it depends on the person, but I overall believe that the buff banner has had a slight glow up rather than a glow down. Let me know what you think about this one.
Screaming Eagles!
I'm not gonna lie, I forgot the gunboats were introduced in Soldier's first weapon cache. It completely slipped my mind, and I had to write this later. Personally, I haven't used them in a very long time. I think it's been like a year and a half. The last time I consistently used the gunboats was probably 5 years ago. And the last time I used the gunboats in general was that video that I made back in January 2024. And I got that footage in like November of 2023, so it's been a long time. I doubt you care about my personal experience. You want me to explain how the gunboats downgraded. First, the current and only stat of the gunboats, besides the obvious inability to use shotguns or banners, is that it gives you a 60% blast resistance from your own rockets. This allows you to rocket jump far more often, without needing to use the jumper or sacrifice damage using something like the Liberty Launcher, as I know a lot of you don't like Liberty Launcher. Though, when those two are paired together, they are one hell of a combo. I believe it brings it down to like 12 damage per rocket jump. It's kind of insane. Though, if we had the original gunboats, that combo would be even better. The gunboats have had only one change, and that's that the original blast resistance was not 60%, rather 75%, allowing you to rocket jump a little bit more freely, doing a little bit less damage to yourself. I mean, either way, the gunboats are still really good. It's a staple for those who like mobility. I know this despite not running them on my own loadouts consistently. I have a hard time considering them much of a glowdown, as the difference is just 15% on a secondary that is still rather good, but it is a glowdown for sure. I couldn't put it any lower.
You're a spineless worm. You are a mistake of nature. You are walking vomit.
As you know, the Equalizer was added in the War update in December 2009, but it would be split into two weapons come the Pyromania update of 2012. The Equalizer would become the Equalizer and the Escape Plan. The Escape Plan is pretty good and shares the original Equalizer model. Yeah, if you didn't know, the black pickaxe model used for the Escape Plan is the original model for the Equalizer. So the gray pickaxe we now know as the Equalizer today got the name, while the Escape Plan got the model. So that's where our problem kind of comes in. Do I compare the Equalizer to the weapon that shares the name? Do I compare it to the better pickaxe? Or do I compare it to the one with the original model? Do I compare it to both? I'm going to predominantly compare it to the weapon that shares its name. So the Equalizer up against the Equalizer, not the Escape Plan. Though real quick, let's go over both for the sake of argument and content. The modern day Equalizer, the gray version, was technically added in 2012, but in reality came out in 2009 and is a simple 2-stat weapon. Damage scales based on health for the downside of 90% less healing from sources like medics and dispensers while the weapon is deployed. At full HP, the Equalizer only does a measly 33 damage, while at 1 HP you'll do up to 107. The Escape Plan, on the other hand, has your speed scale based on health. At normal HP while deployed, you'll move at this 80% standard for soldier, but as your health decreases, your speed increases all the way up to plus 60% as your health gets below 40. At least they don't make you get to 1 health this time to get the max benefit. This makes it so you're almost as fast as Scout with low HP. This major bonus comes at the downside of being marked for death while active and for a few seconds afterwards, so if you put it away, you're marked for, I believe it's 2 seconds. So you take mini crits while deployed and for a few seconds after. It also shares the same 90% less health for medics and dispensers while active penalty that the Equalizer has. As you most likely already know, the modern day Equalizer and even the escape plan doesn't hold a candle to the Equalizer we got on release. I said the weapon got split into the escape plan and the Equalizer. As you can imagine, this means that it was originally merged. It was one weapon. So as your health got lower, yep, you gained an additional speed boost as well as damage. The damage was significantly higher as well. The speed boost was the same as it is today, but the 107 damage was not the cap. Instead, it could reach up to 162 with a single swing. Hit like Mike Tyson and ran like Usain Bolt. The best part, the mark for death penalty was not the downside on release. Instead, it had a downside of no health from healing sources while active. It is a little bit weird because I was looking at old footage and apparently this wasn't listed on the weapon day one, but it still had this downside. It wasn't a straight upgrade. But I mean, you just put the weapon away and boom, you're good. I mean, Jesus, 162 damage while moving at almost the speed of Scout is a bit ridiculous. There has only been one stock weapon that has gone through any significant changes in Soldier's stock kit. I will take a moment to point out that the shotgun has had some minor changes, such as reload speed becoming more standardized between the four classes, and also receiving a new taunt for Soldier in 2009. What we now know as being the taunt for the banner, where he juggles 2 grenades and a spare rocket, was originally the shotgun's taunt until the shotgun received the modern-day 3-volley salute taunt in the war update of December 2009. Miniature segment done, the weapon we're actually to go in depth on is the rocket launcher.
Blammo!
The rocket launcher has had 3 major changes during its lifetime, but we must do the obligatory breakdown of stats of the modern day version because that's what we do. 4 rockets loaded in the chamber at once with 20 in reserve. The projectile travels at about 1100 hammer units, has a base damage of 90, up to 112 ramp up, down to 48 with fall off, and then 24 if you get splash damage or whatever, and has a splash radius of 146 hammer units, which is the same as the modern day grenade and sticky bomb launchers. It has an attack interval of 0.8 seconds and takes about 3.3 seconds to reload all 4 rockets, with the first rocket having a slight delay. Then there is, of course, the pushback that you will receive, allowing you to rocket jump and whatnot. That's pretty obvious. And it has significant knockback to most classes except Heavy, who has an inherent knockback resistance. The rocket launcher is a very simple item and not a terribly difficult weapon to use. A decent, quick, high burst damage, area controlling projectile, and you got 4 to work with at one time. You got a total of 24. A good soldier, even a mediocre soldier, can do some real damage with this weapon. But what has changed about it? Like I said, there was 2 changes, technically 3, but one of the changes was reverted really quickly and was not a day 1 issue, so I'll touch on that, but we're looking at 2 changes mainly. The first one has to do with the rockets themselves, and this one has not been changed or reverted in any sort of way. Originally, the grenade launcher, sticky bomb launcher, and rocket launcher had square bounding boxes, which meant at certain angles, the blast radius was actually a little bit bigger. The original box was 121 hammer units rather than the modern day 146. But at certain angles, this meant that you could potentially have a wider explosion radius. The overall size was increased in hopes of making up for that, which it does for all intents and purposes. There are certain angles that it can kind of not get, but overall it's more consistent, so that's what matters. That change was far more neutral, but this next one certainly was not. This one had to do with the ammo count. Demo Man had the same thing done to him, with his grenade launcher having its ammo reduced from 30 to 16, and the sticky bomb launcher's ammo count being reduced from 40 to 24 in reserve. Soldier, unfortunately, has suffered the same fate. The original rocket launcher had an astounding 36 reserve rockets, totaling 40 rockets instead of the modern day 24, nearly double what he has now. This would last for about a year or so, being brought down from 36 eventually to just 16, which legit did cut Soldier's rockets in half, as he only had 20 instead of 40 total. Though, as you can tell if you play TF2 and have since like 2008, 2009, this was eventually increased by 4 up to 20 reserve rockets, but regardless, it still has 16 less rockets than it did before. That 16 to 20 was the third change I kind of alluded to, by the way. Overall, I think because of the massive amount of rockets you had, so you didn't have to really go out of your way to get ammo all the time, and the fact that the explosion radius change was pretty inconsequential, all things considered, and didn't change much, especially for Soldier, a straight shooting rocket launcher, I think the rocket launcher has had a slight glowdown in recent years. Obviously, not as much as something like the Sandman or Equalizer, but it's hard to say that it had a glow up. Thank you guys for watching today's video. I appreciate it. We will be discussing Pyro in next month's segment, so I hope you stick around. I'll see you later.